And welcome to my video on the lockdown counter clock. For starters, we'll just look at the data sheet for the display driver chip, and down around here where it's joggling up and down, we'll run a little video of me wiring up the back of that panel, speeded up because it was about 2 hours long. So I think everyone's seen these Max 7219s, the serial 8-digit LED driver display drivers, sorry, and they come in a 24-pin dip. It's the sort of the version that I've got because it's easier to solder to at the moment, but you can get them in different packages as well, and they're very simple. You just have to have 5 volts, 2 capacitors which aren't shown on here, a current defining resistor, and then there are 8-digit drives which are pulled down low to sequence through the LEDs, and there are 8 segment drives to drive the 7 segments and the decimal point. And the Max 7219 needs 3 inputs. It has data in, a load, and a clock, and it can be done like SPI, but as it's 5-volt logic, I've used a Microchip PICKit to save worrying about having to put logic level inverters in, as I did think about running it straight from a 3.3 volt supply, but if you come down to the electrical characteristics, a logic high on the input minimum is 3.5 volts. So you'll be lucky if 3.3 volts gives you a constant readable high. So the chances are that you might have problems running it with a 3.3 volt input. Not sure, haven't tried it, but I'm assuming that there could be an issue. So the next thing I sort of talk about is, that's what it looks like on the inside. You have the segment drivers which tend to switch to the positive side, so they switch to 5 volts, and the digit drivers pull a digit down to 0 volts. So you need to have, I think it's common cathode, which caused me a problem because when I first started this I had a lot of common anode LEDs and was going to use them, but of course they wouldn't work with this chip, so I had to go look for some common cathode ones, which I found. But you'll find that I have 6 of one color and 1 of another, so I've got to do some frigging with the current drive as they don't light up equally. And this diagram here just shows you that it takes 16 bits at a time, and you clock in through D in, it clocks through, and if you clock more than the 15 it overspills out, so that you can connect a second one of these to it and just feed the signal through. As long as you keep clocking, the data keeps moving into the next one along the line. And these are the registers I'm going to talk about now, and so we'll go through them in a little bit more detail. The shutdown register, they're all 8-bit wide, but the shutdown bit, there is only 1 bit in the shutdown register which is writable, which is D0. And the default at power up is that D0 is set to 0, which puts the chip into shutdown mode to save power and blanks the display. You can still program the chip in this state, but the display will be blanked, and then writing a 1 to D0 will enable the display and turns it on. You can also use the shutdown to flash the display if required. So if someone put in invalid data and that was your display, you could then pulse or switch the 0 bit high then low, high then low, and the display will turn on and turn off, so it will flash. There is the mode register. The mode register looks at how you decode the data coming in. And looking at the data sheet, there are 4 modes. There is a no decode for digits 0 to 7, which is how you would drive these if you had them connected to a dot display. There's code B for digits 0, but no decode for digits 1 to 7. There is a next option, which is the code B for digits 0 to 3 and no decode for 4 to 7, or the way I'm using it, which is the 4th option, which is code B for digits 0 to 7. But if you look into the data sheet, it seems that putting a 1 equals decode, as the difference between no decode is a decode register is all zeros. For code decode on digit 0, there's a 1 in bit 0 and the rest are all low. And for the code B for digits 0 to 3, there are 3 ones and the rest are all zeros, and the code B for all digits is all ones. So I wonder if you can change that by changing the number of ones. I might look at that later. Then we move on to the intensity register. This register controls the duty cycle of display, and there are 16 steps. There are effectively 32 periods, and the 16 steps control the on time. So you can have 1 on, 31 off, right up to 31 on and 1 off, which is the highest brightness. And that register, the low nibble, gives you the 16 levels of intensity. Then we move down to the scan limit register. This allows you to select how many digits are displayed. Okay. If you have less than 8, you don't need to scan all 8. The problem becomes is if you have less than 3 or 3 or less, the current consumption goes up and you can overheat the drivers. So they recommend that you revisit the RSet value to reduce the current in the drivers if you bring the scan limit down to 3 or less. And that's all mentioned in the datasheet. And then the final one here is the display test register. This again only has 1 bit that you can set, which is D0, and setting it to 0 is normal operation. Setting it to a 1 lights all the digits. So it's just a display test. There's one other sort of register that's not mentioned in this picture here, and that is register with address 0. And the register with address 0 is basically a no op or no operation, so that if you set the address here, sorry, the address there, that one, to zeros, it basically doesn't do anything with the data here, just throws it all away. And the idea of that is that if you cascade more than one chip and you only want to change display data on, say, the second chip, then you send the first 16 bits of data for the second chip, and then you can just send all zeros for the first chip, which is the no op code. And then when you do the load, this won't change. It's as if nothing happened. So that's talking about the registers. Now, this is the important bit for getting the data in if you are not going to be using SPI. And I'm not going to do that because there's no point. I'm just going to bit bang the data to it. And as you can see, there are 3 important signals. D out is basically just a copy of what was in here that was sent earlier. Now, the important timings are the fact that you've got to put the data stable and its most significant bit first, and you need to have a small delay so the data is stable before you take the clock high, and then you change the data, bring the clock. You can change the data while the clock's coming down. It needs to be stable before it goes high again, and you just repeat this 16 times. And at the end of the 16th bit, which is D0, you can take the clock high, and then you see you take the load line high, and that latches in. And the minimum high to low, or the minimum high, is 50 nanoseconds, and the minimum low is 50 nanoseconds. So one clock cycle can be 100 nanoseconds, which equates to, I think it's 10 megahertz clock. There are no restrictions on the time from when this rises to when the load rises. So you could, if you want, pull them both high together, even though I don't. I take this one high and then followed by taking that one high, which you'll see in the software, but the software might be in the video too, as this one is already getting a bit long. Looking at the speeds and the timings here, the Arduino would never be fast enough to exceed these timings, so you should have no problem writing to it. And here down here is the serial data format. You can see the data is the first 8 bits, the address is the next 4, and then a higher 4 are X's, which is don't care. If you like the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and I'll catch you on the next one.